Thank you for tuning into this 2021 General Election Candidate Forum for the Olympia School Board Directors, District 3 and 5 positions. This forum is presented by the League of Women Voters of Thurston County, along with Thurston Community Media and our two co-sponsors, Asian Pacific Islanders Coalition, South Puget Sound Chapter, and Thurston Climate Action Team. The forum is being held electronically due to COVID-19. Candidates, moderators, and timers are all joining in using Zoom links with the help of TC Media. A bit about the League. The League of Women Voters is proud to be nonpartisan. We don't support nor oppose candidates nor political parties at any level of government, but we always work on vital issues of concern to members and the public. The League registers new voters, encourages them to be a voter, studies issues, and advocates for its positions with the Legislature and other governmental bodies. Despite its name, the League is open to everyone over 16. I'm Charlotte Persons from the League, and I will be moderating this forum. Our timer is Tony Wilson. The candidates for Olympia School Board District 3 are Darcy Huffman and Mark Boyer. The candidates for District 4 are Scott Clifthorne and Don Mitchell. For this forum, each candidate will have the opportunity to answer a series of questions. The candidates will be asked the questions in alphabetical order, and the questions will be alternated so that each has the chance to start first. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. The timer will show a sign when you have 15 seconds left, and then will show a red stop sign when your time is up. If a candidate doesn't see, I will tell you when your time is up. There will be 1 minute for closing statements at the end. Mr. Boyer will answer the first question first, followed by Mr. Clifthorne, Ms. Huffman, and Mr. Mitchell. Please let me know if you need me to repeat the question. What motivates you to want to be a school board member? Mr. Boyer.
Thank you. So my motivation is, I think, pretty deep. I am a lifelong Olympia resident. I'm a product of the Olympia School District. My wife and I, after we got married, we very consciously decided where we were going to live, and it was with our schools in mind for the 4 kids that we now have and the family that we anticipated raising. So everything that we have done in our life has really kind of been with the emphasis of sending our kids through a lot of the same schools that we attended. Over the past handful of years, as my kids got into public schools, it's become clear that there's some things that I think need change. And I believe that the leadership at the board level is a big part of that. I think there's a lot of community distrust with the teachers. And so that's why I'm running.
Mr. Clifthorne, what motivates you to want to be a school board member?
Thanks for asking. Public schools were everything to me as a student. I came from a lower middle class family. Neither of my parents attended college, and it was an amazing experience in my own K-12 public school system that gave me the ability to really reach higher and achieve more and chase the dreams that weren't available to members of my family before me. And participating in our school board over the last 4 years, my original motivation to run is all about making sure that the same kind of excellent opportunities that were available to me as a public school student are available to the next generation. I'd also have to say that in high school and college, I was a debater. And the best debaters that I always enjoyed debating against when I was in high school were products of Olympia's school system. And so it's partly in envy for those great young intellects that I decided Olympia would be a great place to lead.
Ms. Huffman.
That's a great question. So I'm running because I believe that schools are the very heart of our communities and that they contribute to the well-being of not only students, but also every single community member. It is our duty and actually in our best interest to make sure that the members of the community, to make sure that every kid in our school gets a great educational opportunity. And we can create that. I have had 3 students go through the Olympia School District. Each one of them have had different needs, and all of them have been met with great teachers, great administrators, great staff, and great bus drivers. And so now it's my time to give back to that community and to make sure that that great education continues on for the next generation and the generation after that.
Mr. Mitchell.
Hi, everybody. Like many of you, I am a parent of 2 kids in the Olympia school system. And like you, sat on pins and needles last year as we've gone through the pandemic and almost unprecedented social unrest and political stress. So I felt called to public service as a professional educator and as a healthcare professional. I think the decision to run came when I heard someone on the school board last year express concern about having windows on school bus being down and how that would help make kids catch cold. And I realized that mistakes about understanding of virus transmission are vital knowledge and information to have. So I want to offer my services to build on the foundations of success in Olympia schools going forward. Thanks.
Mr. Clifthorne goes first for the next question. The COVID-19 pandemic is continuing to cause a severe health crisis throughout the country and in Thurston County. What is your position regarding the school board's role in protecting everyone in the schools? Mr. Clifthorne.
Thank you. Indeed, the pandemic has presented our school districts around the world with unprecedented challenges, and the school board is in a place to lead here. And the way that our school board has led is by working hand in glove with Thurston County's public health officers throughout the pandemic to make sure that we're following their guidance to the T. And that's been a big challenge because we've had moments during the pandemic where many members of our community have encouraged our schools to be more open than our county public health advisors have advised. We've had other moments during the pandemic where the community has wanted them to be more closed, and we followed the public health authorities' guidance in those situations as well. And so I see our role as working together with the community, with staff, and with students to build trust in the advice of our trusted public health officials.
Ms. Huffman?
Thank you. I know that is the top subject on everybody's mind as I've been doorbelling throughout our community. Public Health Authority does have the final say in how we determine how we're going to be back into classes. But I think that the Olympia School Board has done a great job of offering some alternative solutions for parents who don't want to send their kids to school because they don't feel that they don't want to send their kids until they've been vaccinated. I think that, and that is the role of the school board, is to make sure that every single kid gets as good an education as they possibly can. Is it perfect? No, not always. Is it close to perfect? Not always, but there are many different varieties of things parents can do now in order to get their kids an education that they feel safe in sending them for. And it is all about the kids, and that's what the school board is focusing on.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. Well, last year, as you know, Olympia Public Schools were advised to remain closed and remote by Dr. Abdul-Malik and the Thurston County Public Health Office. However, the same Dr. Abdul-Malik told us at St. Martin's University and told private schools in Thurston County that they were able to function safely. And in fact, we did so, as did those private schools, with very minimal spread. And we saw this around the world, that other countries chose to keep, especially elementary school kids, in school, which is so critical for their socio-emotional development. Only in America did we really privilege bars and restaurants staying open while schools were closed. So with my background expertise, I can really ask those critical questions and help to arrive at the best decision to ensure student safety. Thanks.
Mr. Boyer.
Yeah, thank you. I as a parent, last year was incredibly challenging, and I would say one of the biggest issues that I had was a little bit of lack of accountability. When I wrote to the board members, wrote to our superintendent, there was a lot of finger pointing to Dr. A and the health authority. When I wrote to her, we would get the finger pointing back to the schools and the governor's office, and there really was a lack of leadership. And in the end, I don't think any board member that was on the board could have ever been fully prepared for this. So the position that our current board was in is very unenvious. But I think that's the call for good leadership, is to make sure that you're making decisions for everybody. And as a parent who felt the risk of the virus was less than the risk of our kids not being in school, it was very disappointing to not have any option for our children to get the instruction that they need.
I will ask Ms. Huffman the next question first. What is your opinion of teaching about the impact of slavery and race inequity in United States history?
Thank you. That's a great question, and one I knew that was going to come up. We live in the United States of America, and it is impossible to discuss our history, our civics, or our social studies, or literature for that matter, without discussing race. And it's important for us to learn about these things without blinders on at an appropriate age. The full story of our country is both remarkable and devastating, but the distant past does not need to define us unless we let it. And so being aware of where we come from makes it possible for us to create a country that's better for us all. So we need to learn about our history, again, without blinders on, and we need to trust our teachers that they are going to teach our kids at appropriate levels and at appropriate times the things that they need to learn to become better citizens of the United States of America. And we want all of that.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, I think we have a terrible history of racial abuse in this country. And no matter how much we think that we know about slavery and racism, when we study it further, the truth is even worse than we really realized. What's important to remember when we do include this, though, is that we don't demonize people in the present. We want to build empathy. We want to understand and help to build corrections for some of these historic injustices, but that means not being politically divisive in doing so. So absolutely, we need to incorporate this material into our curriculum. It's vital learning and vital to understand, but it should be to help heal and to help build empathy between people. Thanks.
Mr. Boyer.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Mr. Mitchell. I think that all of us want a society that is free of racial divide. I think we've seen so much over the last couple of years that tells us that we've got a lot of work to do. As it relates from what the school board can do to inject that into our schools, I think a lot of that is just good quality leadership and also kind of setting the example. If you talk about equity within our schools. I think that there's still a lot of areas that Olympia School District could improve upon between the west side and east side dynamics and some other components there. But I think for me, the biggest thing is just finding ways to teach our kids how to confront racism when they see it. And a lot of that, I think, starts at home, starts within the community and how we treat one another.
Mr. Clifthorne.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. Could you actually repeat the question?
What is your opinion of teaching about the impact of slavery and race inequity in United States history?
So my opinion is that teaching about those things is absolutely critical to educating students that are prepared to really live the student outcome statements that we've adopted as a school district. And if you take a look at our strategic plan, the outcome number 4, that students graduate having the skills, knowledge, and courage to identify and confront personal, systemic, and societal bias, that can't happen without a clear and credible understanding about the history of slavery, how the Emancipation Proclamation did not end the legacy of racism in this country, how institutional racism affects the day-to-day lives of not only our students and staff and people of color in this community, but all of us, and that it's our collective responsibility to deconstruct the ways in which institutional white supremacy means that students of color and staff of color have fewer opportunities and feel less likely to succeed. It's all of our job to work on that problem together.
The next question goes first to Mr. Mitchell. This last session, the legislature passed SB 5044, adding equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism to existing cultural competency training for school board directors. What is your position on this legislation?
Well, I think it's absolutely important at the highest level, but of course the devil is always in the details. As you know, the school board advises and works with the superintendent to implement these things. The superintendent is the direct supervisor of the employees, teachers, whatnot in the school system. So it is absolutely important. Certainly, public schools are long recognized as a bastion of structural racism, and promoting dialogues, helping to have these conversations to build empathy is really important. I'd point to the book, So You Want to Talk About Race by Ejioma Oluo as an example of how having these kind of dialogues can help to build empathy. Thank you.
Mr. Boyer.
Yeah, I think, again, for all of us, we all want to bridge the gap between, racial inequalities, equity amongst our community. I do worry that at some of the lower levels, from the things that I've heard firsthand from teachers and those in the schools, as this is being trickled out, is that it can be a little bit divisive. And I worry that the things that this is meant to institute, education, understanding, empathy, compassion to others, it's almost like there's a bigger wedge being, built in between our community with this sort of stuff. So, I'll be honest in the things that I don't know in full details, and this is one that is fairly new, and I think time will tell, but I am a little concerned that this particular bill is a little bit more divisive than unifying.
Mr. Clifthorne.
I was an enthusiastic supporter of the Senate bill, and in large part because it mirrored the kind of work that we've been doing for the last 4 years in the Olympia School District. That all starts with board leadership providing funding for new professional learning for both the executive team at the district level, as well as classroom educators, as well as staff that are not certificated educators to do meaningful learning in partnership with the Puget Sound Educational Service District. We've provided the opportunity to participate in coaching and leading for racial equity and super intensive professional learning, small cohort opportunity to do real work about learning about implicit bias. We've gone on in our new reopening plan to line out now the development of a district equity team and building equity team so that we continue to advance the diversity, equity, and inclusion goals that are the stated purpose of the Senate bill at every level of the school district.
Ms. Huffman?
I am in support of the bill. I've done some of my, in some of the other organizations that I belong to, we've done some DEI work, and it's uncomfortable. I am not going to deny that. It doesn't always come across in a positive, particularly manner. And so I can understand why people and some teachers and some administrators and just people in general are uncomfortable with this whole dynamic that we have been put into. But it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that it's uncomfortable and that we have work to do. So diversity, equity, and inclusion starts at the top. And if we are going to teach our kids about it, if we are going to become a society that really truly celebrates our diversity, then every single one of us needs to do everything that we can in order to make that work.
Mr. Boyer, you get the next question first. Class size is an ongoing issue, especially in the primary grades and with the need to maintain distances of 3 feet among students due to COVID. What would you do to ensure appropriate class sizes and distancing throughout the school day?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first and foremost, it's a matter of resources within our district. I'd be curious to know a little bit more details about why our district office has grown at a level that is not comparable to our teacher population, our paraeducator contracts that we have. There's a huge need for more educators, and we've got a great pool of people in our community, but our district has grown exponentially relative to the teacher size and the teacher pool within our schools. Some of that is also facilities. We've got a challenge with a growing community and population growth that we need more schools. We need another middle school. We need another high school. And these are challenges that aren't new, but, you know, I think those are huge topics that will be a big differentiator between what our schools look like 5 and 10 years from now.
Mr. Clifthorne?
Thank you. So Initiative 1351, shrunk class sizes in the state of Washington, is a ballot initiative, and the Olympia School District is in full compliance with the initiative. That means at the early elementary levels that we have a teacher to student ratio of 1 to 15, and it goes up progressively as you go increase in age throughout our school system. It's a fact that we have approximately 1.5 times the number of paraeducators per students as either of our neighboring school district. It's also a fact that we have the smallest class sizes in Thurston County, and we'll continue to prioritize that. And especially when it comes to being safe in the classrooms, the district office has some great leadership on the facility side under former school board director Frank Wilson. He and his team have been using some construction tools, some fun triangles to go out and make sure that students are appropriately spaced out in classrooms and in lunchrooms.
Ms. Huffman.
I do think that the schools have done a fabulous job of getting our kids, keeping our kids safe through this COVID with social distancing. I too applaud Frank Wilson for all that he has done. I also understand that our administration has increased, but some of that is simply so that we can take some of the workload off of our teachers. Our teachers, there is no doubt our teachers are overworked, and they are not trained in many of the things that we may be asking them to do. So I applaud the fact that the school district has hired more social workers and more more in learning types of people, so that we can take some of the load off of our teachers and let them get to doing the things that they do best, and that's teaching our kids.
You were muted there, but I assume you were talking to me. I think there's near-term challenges and there's longer-term challenges. As was mentioned, the Olympia area is growing. I think the student population is growing, so there's a need for long-term planning to make sure that we have sufficient space and staff to meet that need. However, in the short term, we also have the challenge of the coronavirus pandemic and with the need to maintain physical spacing. And I know in the last board meeting, there were a number of parents that spoke in the public comments about their concerns for lunch being held outside versus inside. So this is something that parents are really watching and concerned about. Buildings are of different ages. They have different ventilation systems. So we would need to direct our leadership to really look building by building and implement guidelines independently in the short run, and just ensuring that we have oversight that those standards are met. Thanks.
The candidates now have an opportunity to ask their opponents a question. The question shouldn't take no longer than 30 seconds. The candidates will have 1 minute to respond. Mr. Clifthorne, do you have a question for Mr. Mitchell?
Yes, I do. So earlier on, we talked a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's an area where the current school board has invested a significant amount of time and financial resources to build a serious DEI program in the school district. If elected, what would your next step be to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives?
Thanks. Well, like you say, there have certainly been made steps or strides made in this direction. It's important to be sure that the rubber does hit the road in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we need to start looking at how are we recruiting, new teachers. Children of color look to role models in teaching as in other areas to see themselves as grown adults and responsible members of society. So we really need to recruit and retain a more diverse teaching and support staff as much as possible. And that is a challenge in an area where the population is largely Caucasian. But that would be probably the next step in the process, building on that recruitment and retention. Thanks.
Ms. Huffman, do you have a question for Mr. Boyer?
I do. So, Mark, you have shared on social media that you've moved your kids to a private school, in part because OSD leadership doesn't align with your values. And while it's absolutely your right to choose a school where your children will have their needs met, I think a lot of voters would like to know what you mean when you say that OSD doesn't align with your values. For example, are you opposed to the district increased training and staffing for racial equity? Do you agree with the adoption of the non-biased dress code?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, this has been a topic that's been brought to my attention, and I have no problem discussing it. My kids are currently the 3 out of the 4 that are elementary, and I guess 1 middle schooler at St. Mike's for this year. We felt last year that our concerns over in-person instruction and the lack thereof at the public school level was not heard. It wasn't recognized. We were given no options as parents that felt our kids needed that outlet and the exposure to amazing leadership within our schools. And so we put them at St. Mike's. We also wanted continuity this year. And as of right now, I do still feel that there's some uncertainty over the school year continuing as it is, with in-school instruction being the focal point. So that's the primary reason that they are there. I do think that there's challenges at the district level that I don't agree with. And that's a big reason why I'm running. I could have easily just said, I'm done and washed my hands clean, but I'm here for all kids, not just my own.
Mr. Boyer, do you have a question for Ms. Huffman?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of them. I guess, you know, the biggest thing that I hear is a divide in our community with parents, with teachers, administrators, and our district and superintendent. I'd be curious to know what your perspective is on that divide, the wedge in our community, and what you would do to try to bridge that. How can you repair some of the, you know, some of the distrust that is out there between families, teachers, and our district?
Thank you, Mark. Well, so you weren't very specific in your question, so telling me exactly what you feel like that divide is. I will tell you that from the teachers and the staff members and parents that I have talked to, one of the things that they talk to me about is communication, open communication. And I have a degree in communication from Kansas State University, been doing communication for a really long time, and looking at some of the websites and also some of the letters and things that have gone out. I agree that we could use some help in our communication skills. I think a lot of times people say, well, you didn't hear me because we don't agree with you. But what I think we need to do a better job of is saying, these are the reasons that we are making these types of decisions, and this is the criteria that we used. And hopefully some of that then will dissipate.
Mr. Mitchell, do you have a question for Mr. Clifthorne?
Yes, thank you. So as a teaching professor, I receive student evaluations from my students each semester, and this feedback lets me know in what areas I'm doing well with my teaching and areas in which I can improve to better help my students. Yet Olympia Public Schools do not offer parents and students a similar opportunity. This particularly hurts families of color, as public school education is identified as one of the most significant sources of structural racism in society. Families currently only have general surveys, which cannot identify specific school and classroom level problems. Why are families not given this opportunity for individual voice?
So that's an interesting proposal, and not a proposal that the school board has debated. I will tell you that a year and a half ago, the school district actually instituted a brand new wall-to-wall universal screener that's offered by Panorama Education that does in fact allow us to drill down to the building and classroom level when it comes to student experiences on both academic and social emotional learning vectors. And so we do actually, starting this year, have the kind of information that would help us drill down and improve along those lines. I think that one of the questions is, how do we make that accessible to everybody? And if you tune into our last school board meeting, our last full one, not our work session, we had a lengthy conversation with our new director of family engagement about providing live interpretation as well as live translation services to families that speak other languages that would help them engage more with that new survey tool.
Each candidate now may provide a 1-minute closing statement. Ms. Huffman. Ms. Huffman, do you?
Yes, Yes, thank you. So thank you so very much to the League of Women Voters of Thurston County for holding this. This has been a great opportunity for us to talk to each other and talk to our constituents, or hopefully our constituents. So thank you very much for that. You know, I have more than 40 years of work experience, and my teammates who I have worked with for many of those years would tell you that I am a collaborator. And I think that that's what being on a board is about. Being on a board is working together to solve problems or working for the greater good. And in this case, the greater good is our kids. Jimmy Carter once said that every day you're given a brick and you can either choose to build a wall with it or build a bridge. And I'm kind of a bridge builder. And I would like to see us do that. I bring a different perspective to this school board because my kids are already through school, and I've had 3 very different kids. And so I can bring a perspective that other candidates perhaps cannot. So thanks again for your time, and thanks for being a voter.
Mr. Mitchell.
Hey. In a time of extraordinary challenges for public schools, from a global pandemic and a fractured social and political environment, there's a need for people with the capability and knowledge to collaboratively lead the way. As a university professor, I have both practical and educational preparation in professional education. As a PhD with a focus on outcomes measurement, I have the background to advocate for and evaluate data from appropriate empirical assessments related to learning and education. With a 20-year professional background in pediatric emergency nursing practice, I've seen firsthand the emergence of the epidemic in child and adolescent mental health and have the practical experience to improve community-based interventions. If elected to the Olympia School Board, my overall goal is to create an improved environment for children and adolescents' educational success. I'll work toward this goal by focusing on 3 areas: focus on essential skills, creating accountable schools, and supporting students' physical and mental health. Students must focus on the essential skills that are the basis for success in later life: effective written oral communication, quantitative reasoning, and critical thinking. Schools also have many opportunities for innovation. For example, technical training is an appealing option for many that creates a pathway to a financially and professionally stable life. And I ask for your
Mr. Boyer.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for everybody for tuning in and give us an opportunity to share. You know, I want to make it known, I am not, you know, just here fighting against everything that the school district is doing. I think the big part of why I've chosen to run is around some of the frustrations that I have. But I think our schools, you know, are still incredible in the teachers that we have working there, the administrators that support them, and ultimately the kids that go there are the ones that benefit from that. But I think that there's change that needs to be made. I do believe that balance is necessary on our board. I think that I've got a very different perspective than the 5 board members that currently represent our community. I think that there's some accountability that needs to be had for our board and for our district leadership, where our money is spent, what the emphasis is on the leadership within the schools. Why are we losing really well-qualified leaders within our schools? So I think I bring a different perspective and would love your vote to represent that next year.
Mr. Clifthorne.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting together such a great forum and everything you do to increase civic participation in our community. My name's Scott Clifthorne. You can visit my website at scottcliffthorne.nationbuilder.com to learn more about my campaign. I'm running for a second term on the school board because 4 years ago, we began an 18-month strategic planning process. It was incredibly participatory. We had over 70 meetings with community members from all walks of life to ask the question, what kind of changes can we make in our school system to make it successful for you and your family and our community? We got a wealth of feedback that were funneled into the 6 strategic student outcome statements that are the core of the district's educational vision. Those were seeds that we planted. And in the last 2.5 years since implementing that plan, those seedlings have become saplings. And I'm excited to stay for the next 4 years and continue cultivating a school district that embraces and advances diversity, equity, and inclusion work, continues to increase our graduation rates, which are now over 92 and 93% respectively at our comprehensive high schools. I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer, Scott Clifthorne, Darcy Huffman, and Don Mitchell for participating in this forum. We thank TC Media for producing this program, and we thank our co-sponsors, APIC and TCAT. The forum will be available on TC Media channels, the League website, as a YouTube video. We are also producing forums for the Olympia City Council and the other Olympia School Board candidate positions. Those videos will also be available through the League website. We are glad you've taken the opportunity to view this forum. We remind you to be a voter in the general election beginning October 15th and closing on November 2nd, 2021.